Hello, my name is Otoma. Welcome to Image Bearers. This is the second season, episode 35. I'm so excited to have on the show today Shari Simpson. Shari is a playwright, an author, a screenwriter, and a public speaker. She's very busy, very busy.
Yes, yes.
She co-wrote the off-Broadway hit, Maybe Baby It's You, and the Disney Channel original, The Swap, with her longtime partner, Charlie Shanayan. The first book in her series, which is Sleepwalkers, and it was entitled Sam Saves the Night, was published last year on October 1st, 2019 by Disney Hyperion. Her second book in the series comes out not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday afterwards, so check it out. It's going to be on Amazon. And that book is, again, like on the 17th, it's coming out. Shari has written for New York Times, Huffington Post, Brainchild, Book and Film Globe. She co-wrote and starred in a series of comedy videos for Nickelodeon and with Wendy Aarons. She currently has a feature film called Forever Lost and Found. It's in development right now with Broken Road Productions, and the TV series Hopetown that's also in development with Vast Entertainment. So she has a lot going on, and I'm so excited, like I said, to have her on the program.
It sounds so impressive when you list it all next to each other like that. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, she got more programs, you know. So she also has a dog called Mila Kunis, which is a pug.
Yes.
She's sweet, cuddly, and will eat the food right out of your mouth if you're not paying attention.
That is correct, like all pugs, yes.
So welcome again to the show.
It is so nice to be here, Otoma. Thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I know we tried to have you on a little while back, and we had to change some plans right there.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited to have you on. I started earlier this year, really getting a little bit more focused on writing and learning about screenwriting through Save the Cat and just different things that I had learned about. I haven't read that book, but I have purchased it. Right. And I think when I saw everything that you have done and worked on, I was like, wow, this is very impressive. So I know last year you wrote Sam Saves the Night, which again is the first in your series, the Sleepwalkers series. Can you please tell us about the book, how the idea came about, and I guess even what the book is about?
Oh, absolutely. So I just happen to have it right here.
Oh yes, thank you.
Oh, there it is. Yes. So Sam Saves the Night came out last year, published by Disney Hyperion. And it's a book about a 13-year-old girl who is a chronic sleepwalker. And she's such a bad sleepwalker that she's actually a danger to herself. It's a very wacky, it's comic and dramatic at the same time, but it's a little out there, like my own brain, right? So
and the character Sam, I think it's after yourself, right?
She's basically based on me, even though I was not a sleepwalker. There's elements of me. Well, there's elements of, when you're writing, you put elements of yourself in everything. Sure. But yeah, there's definitely, she's definitely a testament to me and my take on the world. Let's just say that. Anyway, so she's such a danger to herself that her mother takes her to this rogue sleep doctor. He's a parasomnist, and he's rogue. He's been kicked out of the AASM, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And we find out why is because how he treats his patients is he detaches their soul from their body. And so their bodies can sleep at night and their souls wander the whole night. And they meet all the other souls. And they're all teenagers. Right. They meet all the other souls. They hang out with them. They form into tribes and that whole thing. So yeah, it's quite wacky and quite out there. And how I came up with the idea was,
well, I think you mentioned your husband talks in his sleep.
Yes.
On one of the episodes.
So there was a couple of things. Usually my stories kind of come from a couple of different directions. One was the fact that my husband is a chronic sleep talker. He doesn't walk, but he will have entire conversations in his sleep. He will argue with people. One time, I woke up because he was doing this in his sleep.
Wow.
And I was like, honey, what are you doing? And he said, leave me alone. I'm leading songs at church.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's always intrigued me. So I'm like, oh my gosh, the sleeping mind is so fascinating to me.
Does he wake up tired then, or not really?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes
Okay.
if he's had an argument with someone in his dreams, he will definitely wake up a little tired. Yeah. So I've always been very intrigued by the sleeping mind and what the brain does when you're sleeping. And so that was always in my head, right? And in my writer's notebook, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But then I had this other, and sometimes things will just drop into my head out of nowhere. People will call it the muse. The muse sort of just drops things into your brain. But I had this image of a girl walking to her bedroom door, and just before she leaves her bedroom, she turns around and sees that her body is still in the bed, asleep. It just kind of came into my mind, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Where did that come from? And that's something. And I kind of let it bake around in my head for a while. And then I kept thinking then about my husband and the sleep talking. And then I just really wanted to write a book about a girl who felt like an outcast. But there was a place where she did belong. And so she finds out where she belongs in the tribes. Her soul finds out where it belongs. So that's what the story is about.
Yeah, I looked at it a little bit on Amazon. I think it had like a bunch of reviews, and I think almost all of them are like 5-star. So I know, yeah, I know for those that may not be aware, I think it's like a preteen book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they call it middle grade.
Middle
so
grade.
It's upper middle grade. She's 13. She's at the end of 7th grade. So middle grade kind of covers between like 9 to 13. So this is definitely on the upper middle grade end of the spectrum.
Okay. So tell us about how you got into writing and became a playwright and became so busy and do all these awesome things. How did it kind of germinate and start?
Well, I was a voracious reader as a child.
Okay.
I still am a voracious reader, and we'll probably talk about that. I'm always reading. I'm not kidding. I'm always reading at least 4 books at a time.
What are you reading right now, just real quick?
I am reading, So You Want to Talk About Race by, I'm going to butcher her name, and I don't want to do that. Her name is Edje Oluo.
Okay.
So You Want to Talk About Race. It's fantastic. I'm also reading Crossover, which is a book by Kwame Alexander. It's a verse book about a basketball player, a kid. I'm also reading The Warmth of Other Suns. And I just finished The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. And I'm also reading White Too Long by Robert P. Jones. Is that it? Yeah. And I also, this is crazy. I also read books and review books for a website called Indie Reader. So it's independently published books. So I'm reading I just finished a book for them, and I'm reading another book now. So yeah. So I guess what's that, 6? No wonder I can't find time to do the dishes, and that's nuts. So yeah. Anyway, so as I was saying all that to say that I was a voracious reader as a child. So I think in paragraphs, and I think in sentences, and I think in it was such an early influence. It's just the way my mind, like I'll see words on the page, and so much so that people will tell you that I'm always kind of in my head, and like sometimes they have to be like, Shari, hello. I am not a visual person, so I don't see like things around me because I'm always like thinking like about something. So anyway, so that was my early influence, and I started writing really, really young, and I wrote 6 chapters of a book when I was 11 years old. And my mother still to this day is like, man, if you'd finished that book, we'd be rich by now. It's very much my mother. And yeah, and then I wrote in high school, I wrote for the school paper, and then I was an actor for many years. So I stopped, I wasn't writing as much, but I always wanted to write my own stuff. And that's basically what happened. My writing partner and I were part of a comedy writing class, and then we were part of an improvisational and sketch comedy troupe. And we always wrote for each other. We just, on stage, we clicked, and we've been writing partners for years now. And we just clicked. Our senses of humor clicked. Our take on life clicked. He's a believer, he's a Christian. He likes he's very funny, but very deep, so that's kind of like, we liked telling really deep stories with a lot of comedy because that makes it a lot easier to take. So it's not so preachy, right?
Mhm.
And so we decided we were going to write something for ourselves. So we wrote a 2-actor, 24-character play. So we each played 12 different characters in a series of vignettes. And it did very well. Producers picked it up. It got 2 off-Broadway runs and a run in Hollywood.
That's the Baby Baby It's You, or that?
Maybe Baby It's You, yes.
Okay.
And it's published by Dramatic Publishing, and it's still done all the time. And that kind of started the whole thing back up again of my passion for writing. In fact, I was just talking about this somewhere else, I can't remember, but I remember the first night that we performed the first night we performed an early version of the play. And there was one particular scene that I'd written that was very vulnerable for me. And that was like, everyone loved that scene. Like, they got it. They got what was going on in my head. And it was so incredibly exciting to me that, like, I had written something that people were like, I knew exactly what that was. I felt that. I've done that.
That's awesome.
It made me cry. I didn't sleep that whole night because I was so wired. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my thing. I love I like to do lots of different things. I was like, but this is my thing. This is my thing. I've always wanted to be a writer. And now I remember why I wanted to be a writer. So that's how the whole thing started out. That was a very, very long-winded answer to your question. I think I touched on everything. Did I?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think you definitely answered it. So, like, how does that work? So, like, you have an idea. I think you mentioned a little bit about, sleepwakers and, how sound saves the night, kind of like how that kind of came together into, like, from an idea, like, it's kind of like a collision of 2 ideas. It kind of seems like, and then it kind of went from there. But is there a general process that you follow that, you start out with an idea, or I guess a few, or however that works, into, a finished product? Is there something you can share about that?
Well, it's interesting because most writers who are professional writers have a 2-stream thing. One is their own stories that they want to tell, and the other one is things that you get hired to write. Like, we got hired to write the Disney movie. That was not our idea. In fact, it was a YA novel that Disney Channel optioned and purchased, and then they brought in a bunch of writers to do a pitch on how they would turn it into a movie, and we won the pitch.
This is the swap?
This is the swap, yes. And we're currently working on a project that we got hired to write by, if I say this, everybody always goes, oh, I know exactly what that is. Highlights Magazine is a long-term child's magazine. It's been around for like 70 years or something crazy like that. And they have a very famous section of it called Hidden Pictures, where you'll get a picture and there's like objects hidden in like weird places and you have to find it. So it's a puzzle. It's very fun. It's very engaging. It's very popular. So they hired us to adapt that into an animated series. So here I am now. We're in animation now, which is again very different than playwriting and film writing and book writing. It's a completely different medium. So you're having to
Sure.
work your head around these very fast, very intense visuals where the story is really told visually.
Mhm.
And um, so like I said, and we also the Hopetown thing that we had, it's a TV pilot. We were hired to write that as well. We adapted a book. And so yeah, so it's fun. It's very fun. I find it very entertaining to be assigned a writing job.
Mhm.
I enjoy that immensely, so that it kind of gives my brain a break from trying to come up with the original idea, which
Mhm.
can be like, there's this wonderful screenwriter, Meg LaFauve. She was one of the writers on Inside Out for Pixar. And she has a podcast, and she always calls it you're in the lava. When you're in the lava of an idea, and you're suffocating, and you're trying to like work your way into making it an actual structured story.
Mm.
Yeah. So a lot of times, like, you're in the lava of your own story, and you're like, oh, can somebody fix this for me? I don't know how to tell this story. Um, yeah. So you have those two different streams of work, two different income streams. And um, so the stuff that I come up with myself, usually it's something that's been, I carry a writer's notebook with me. It's this tiny little thing. It fits in my purse. It's so
Mhm.
small, and nobody could ever understand it if they looked at it, because it'll be literally like one sentence or even a word, just something that I know what it means, and I'd kind of leave it in there and let it marinate, um,
Mhm.
and then come back later to it. So there's a couple things in there that had been like floating around in my head, and one in particular, the book that I'm currently, the book that my agent is currently shopping, was from an idea that I'd had like like 5 years ago, and I knew exactly what it was, but I didn't know how to tell excuse me, how to tell the story. And so it took me a long time to formulate the story, because it's a magical realism, which is, you have to build an entire world. It's an
Mm.
alternate
World
universe,
building. Yeah.
right? So it's world building, and anybody will tell you that that is really tough. I mean, my partner Charlie and I have been doing so much world building lately. We're like, oh my gosh, we just want to write a story about a woman who goes to the store and meets somebody, and they have a friendship, like anything in the real world we're like up for, because lately we've just been doing so much world building. Anyway, so did I answer your question? I think so. I did, didn't I?
Yeah. So you have a booklet, and then
Yes.
you try to figure out ways to structure the idea once you're in the
Yes.
lava
Yes.
to make it into something that will work.
That was pretty good,
And
Otoma.
and,
Yeah,
and,
that's
and
that's great.
that's a whole, I'm sure, I think you maybe talk about that later. That's something that you teach, but
Yes.
you got to start out with a really good idea that you know is a good idea, and
Yes.
then you got to have some structure around it
Yes.
into making it a story.
Hmm.
And I think based on your acting career, and then obviously reading voraciously, so
Yeah.
how different, you get a lot of ideas obviously from your reading, that
Yes.
what's a good story and what's not a good story, and how things kind of are put together to be able to come up with what makes sense for you. So okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So what inspires you to continue to create and come up with what keeps you going?
Getting paid for it does help. I gotta tell you. I mean, there was a long period where we were writing specs, and like shopping them around and not making much money at all. And that was hard to keep going. I got to tell you, that was really hard. I was, I've never cared much about like um, money and having comfort and stuff, you know. I mean, I've always been like, if I have my bed and my computer and some books and my people that I love, I don't need anything else. And I still sort of live like that. It kind of drives people a little bit crazy, to be honest. But uh, and but you got to pay your bills, right? You know, so there was some fallow periods there where it was really, really tough, and really tough to keep going when you're writing thing after thing and nothing is selling, because then you start to doubt yourself.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah, you start to doubt yourself. You start to doubt, you get the imposter syndrome, right? Like, see, I knew I couldn't do this. That one thing, that thing I sold, or those two things I sold, fluke. That was a fluke, you know. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I stink, you know, whatever, whatever it is. So you kind of have to like keep going through that. And there was a period where Charlie and I wrote, gosh, 3 or 4 feature scripts, and we almost sold them, each one of them, except none of them sold. Like, you know, everything looked really promising, and we were, you know, taking them out and pitching them and everything, and nothing sold. And that was a long chunk of time. And that was, man, that was hard. That was really hard. And just about the time, literally just about the time we were like, we don't have it, you know, we can't really, we obviously can't do this, or if God wants us to do this, then something will come along. And that's when the Disney movie came along, like right about that time. It kind of set us off in a new direction. So yeah, so that's what, you know, we were a little younger then. It gets a little harder as you get older. If you haven't sort of broken into a certain echelon of writers where people are seeking you out, you're still having to sell yourself again and again and again. That's challenging. You know, we're sort of at this place where we have a good reputation. You know, we have great ideas. We pitch great, you know, and, you know, any writer will tell you, like, for every 30 great ideas you have, you'll sell 1 or 2, you know. So you have to have incredible belief in your skills, and a real passion for it. And I just have a passion for storytelling. I believe that God is a storyteller, you know. And that's the thing. I think in stories, I talk in stories, I read and watch movies and shows obsessively, because that's the way my brain works. I can't stop it. You know, there's been times when I've been like, oh, if only I loved math and could do this other thing. Oh, if only I loved this, so I could, because, you know, I want to add value to the world, right? You know, it's a passion of mine. Like, you know, so I'm like, oh, why didn't I become a nurse? Why didn't I become a social worker? Why didn't I, you know, do something that adds real value to the world? I'm so selfish. You know, you get into this, like, this mindset, and you have to remember that, you know, the pandemic has definitely taught us this thing of, like, stories really save people's lives, right? You know, I mean, when you're cut off from interaction, and you're cut off from your job, and you're cut off from, you know, the things that you do to entertain yourself, my gosh, you know, people and reading and watching Netflix like insanely, and it has helped people to stay sane in this time, right? So there is, you have to believe that you're adding value to the world through your storytelling. And I believe that I'm very proud of the stuff that I've written and the stuff that we've written. I feel like it all has that same tenor and tone of love, humor, great characters trying to figure things out, and a sense that we want to put goodness into the world, but not in a Hallmark card sort of sappy, sentimental way, but in a legitimately realistic, character-based manner.
Yeah, I think that to keep going, you definitely have to have that passion. And I think that, yes, you want to be able to, have enough money to survive and maybe have even a little bit extra so you can get through challenging times that may come up or whatever. But I don't think that's the primary reason that you write. I think it's primarily because you believe in stories and you just really want to get them out into the world, it sounds like to me. And you really want people to, rejoice with you as you're able to put together these ideas and, kind of share these stories.
Yeah.
And I guess that leads kind of to the next one, which is, how do you feel when you're able to see something that you've created, yourself or with your partner together, whether it's a movie or whether it's a book or a play or whatever. I think you kind of shared that a little bit.
Yeah.
Where you mentioned it's just they get it. They see this scene and they're like, I stayed up all night. But can you share anything more about that?
Oh, well, it's really fun. I mean, that was fun because we were performing our own material, which was very different than the first time that we auditioned right after we wrote Maybe Baby 2, we wrote the book to a musical. And we were with the book writer, the lyricist and the musical, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? The musical director, and the four of us auditioned a bunch of people for the show. We were doing the show at a theater in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and having people come in one after another and read the stuff that you've written and seeing people do different things, that was really pretty fascinating, I have to say. Because it's one thing to be doing your own stuff, but it's another thing to be watching person after person doing your stuff. And then the really fun thing of when they did the Disney movie, and I got to go to the set and watch them, act, and then there was like all these people and cameras, and oh my gosh, it's outrageous how much goes into making a film. And it just was really, I mean, you can imagine, that was pretty exciting. And then to go to the premiere in Los Angeles and sit with all these people and watch a movie that you wrote,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like the thrill of a lifetime. I mean, it's what every writer, they enjoy it so much. It was so exciting. It was so exciting. Yeah. And to hear other people laugh at the things, that's one thing, definitely. And my writing partner always says this about me. He's like, I know you laugh at that because you wrote that line. Like, you always laugh at your own stuff. It's true. I do crack myself up. So yes, and to hear like somebody say a line on the screen and people laugh, I'm like, oh yeah, it worked, it worked. So
That's
that
awesome.
was really fun. Yeah.
So did you get feedback from the kids as far as your Sleepwaker series? What's that been?
Kids in general, or my own children? My own children really liked it, thank goodness, because it'd be hard to live in the house with them if they didn't. But yes, I heard it from a lot of kids, and that was the most exciting thing. And I have to say that one of the best things that has come out of being an author is I do author visits and I do writing workshops in schools. Anywhere from like 4th grade all the way through college. And I love that.
That's awesome.
Love that so much, to see somebody, like, see the light go on in somebody's head when you're talking about writing and how to convey what it is that you're feeling and put it on the page or put it on the screen. Oh my gosh. And it's just that is like a major blessing. That is like, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and this kind of leads to the next question to a degree, which I think, like, for me personally, I think that writing, being a playwright, and then movies, someone who does all three of those, they seem to me like overlapping, but also very distinct skills that a person needs to have.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned, teaching people to write and so forth, getting their ideas out there. But what do you say about that? Do you think that's correct, that these are like connected but distinct at the same time, and it takes a unique
Yes.
set of either training skill or understanding of how things work to be able to do all that?
Yes. 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 It's there's such different mediums, and um, I actually teach a kids class on the difference between writing for books and writing for movies, and it's so different because books are, it's prose, right? And you get to see inside people's heads. It's tons and tons of words, right? You're you're seeing characters thinking, their insights. You get to see pieces of their past that, like, that's the reason why they're behaving that the way they are in the present.
Mhm,
And uh, for film, it's a visual medium,
mhm,
right? You're telling the story through dialogue, yes, but mostly um, visual. The set pieces, the action. It's all about action.
mhm,
You don't get to see inside people's heads. You only get to
mhm,
understand them from what they do, and
mhm,
sometimes from what they say. But as we all know, people usually don't say what they're actually thinking, right? So
mhm,
there's all that subtext, um, and the thing that's also really interesting about the difference between writing for books and writing for movies is when you write a book, you're done, right? You have an
mhm,
editor and they help you shape the story and everything. But when the book is done, it's yours. Nobody's going to change it, right? But when
mhm,
you write a film, you're basically writing a blueprint for somebody else's creation.
mm,
And when I teach my classes, I always show um, Vincent van Gogh did a sketch for his famous painting Bedroom at Arles. And he did a sketch. It's a black and white sketch, and he's got notes like in all the corners and stuff. And then I put next to it the actual painting in full color,
right.
and I'm like, that's what it's like when you write a screenplay. You're just basically writing the blueprint, the sketch for what the actual thing is going to be. There's going to be a lot of changes, lots of stuff
Mhm,
that's going to get cut. It's somebody else's vision because a film is generally it's the director's vision, right?
mhm,
They're the ones who shape it. It's their tone, their ideas on casting, their ideas on um, shots and the editing and all that stuff. So you basically hand over the reins, and you have nothing to say about how they do it. The book is yours, the film is not. They can bring out the writers, they can throw out half your screenplay and bring in writers to write the second half. You don't have much ownership when it comes to that. So yeah, it's a very, very, very different thing. And also finding out that writing for animation is also very, very different from both of those. So yeah, so you get stretched. You definitely get stretched. I mean, it all starts with words, but other than that, it's very different.
But I would say even with that, I think a person who can write a good screenplay, I think, and correct me if this is wrong, can write a good book because like to understand screenplay, you have to understand a lot of elements of story to make a good screenplay, and
Mm-hmm.
that I think ties in a lot to writing a good book.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's harder to go from writing a good book, someone who writes a good book, to write a good screenplay, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy to go the other way because you've already
Oh,
got the
interesting. Yeah.
you've already got the structure a lot more clearly in your mind as far as like how
Mm-hmm.
things work. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, to write a screenplay is a lot faster. Everything moves a lot faster than in a
Yeah.
book. And
Yeah.
you can just kind of slow it down, but it's harder. I think it's hard. So you can tell
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because I do agree that if you're writing films, you have a good sense of story structure.
Yeah.
And that's really important for for writing a book, that doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to make a character alive and come off the page.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is a different skill set. But a lot of people go back and forth, but some people can't. I'm trying to think of who it was that there's a famous story about a book writer who was trying to write films, and it was just a disaster for him. He couldn't figure out what a film was. He knew what a book was, right? He knew how to tell that kind of story, but he could not figure out how to tell a story in pictures, basically.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
that's what it is. Yeah.
So what advice would you have for people who want to get into either writing or into screenplays? And again, there's probably some overlap and some distinction, as we kind of mentioned already. We won't talk about the animation right now, but
Yeah.
for those first two, what advice would you give to people that want to, hey, I'd like to get started in this? What's
the business aspect of it, or the actual writing? Because
the actual writing?
The actual writing. They're two very different things. I always say the first big step is to keep a writer's notebook. You can have a tiny little writer's notebook, and just when you get an idea, something kind of strikes something in you, write it down. And let it stay there. And then you can also do writing exercises in your writer's notebook, which is really fun. One of the ones that I frequently, a wonderful teacher taught me this once from an improv writing class. She always starts out with writing stupid pet names. So she just makes herself laugh and kind of breaks because there's nothing worse. This is something that I always talk about in my classes. There's nothing worse than the blank page or the blank screen, right? Oh, it's paralyzing. You can get lost in it and you're done, So sometimes if you fill part of it with nonsense, or something, or a writing exercise, it kind of breaks the visual of the white screen or the white page. Read a lot. Read. If you want to write a book, if you want to write a middle grade novel, read tons of middle grade novels. If you want to write a nonfiction story about something fascinating, read a lot of nonfiction. See how that story is told.
Right.
If you want to write a film, watch a lot of movies, but read a lot of screenplays, because that's something that some aspiring screenwriters tend not to do. They'll watch the movies, but it's best to watch the movies and read the blueprint, right? And these days you can get them all online, right? And to read and see what a screenplay is, what it looks like, and then learn story structure. And I say that with a little bit of a caveat, meaning some people will say that you shouldn't go structure first. You should go story first and then place the structure over it. But in general, we're sort of programmed to respond to a certain kind of storytelling. This is a vast generalization. There are certainly many exceptions to this rule, but we tend to think when we're watching a film about a 3-act structure, like thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? We think about like there's a problem, there's an obstacle, overcoming, disaster, overcome at the end. So there is a sense of story structure within us and within our minds. So it's helpful to know that. Read really good screenwriting books and writing books. I am a big fan of Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. I work for them. Little side thing. I actually read stuff for their contests, their screenwriting contests. Wow. I'm one of their judges. And so I read lots and lots and lots and lots of screenplays and pilots. And there's a number of really great screenwriting books, but it's one of those things that nobody can really tell you how to do it, right? If you read from a lot of different sources, you can sort of synthesize everything into your own style. But it does help to know your genres and know what it is, what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's awesome. So what do you do for fun?
Read. To me, that's fun. I mean, it's crazy. Like I really do read for fun. I read for business, and but I also read for pleasure. And that to me is the most fun thing there is to read or watch films. I do also exercise a lot. I like fitness, right? And I like hiking, and I love pugs. Anybody who knows me, look, I'm wearing my my hairy pugger shirt. Everybody who knows me knows that I have a pug obsession. That one thing that's very entertaining to me is to watch pug videos, because as the great humorist Margot Kaufman says, the pug is living proof that God has a sense of humor. They're very entertaining, and I could watch them all day long with their weird little faces and their expressions. So yeah, that's
I think isn't that you have a pug in your series too?
Oh, I have a pug in every single thing I write. Even if they have a tiny little part, like the film that we have in development now, pug has a tiny little part, but it's in there, right? And Charlie knows I always have to have a pug in everything that I write. It's my signature.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're doing. It's so exciting to me. I'm so glad you're able to make some time to come on the program.
Oh, it was such a pleasure, Otoma. I hopefully it was clear. Sometimes I can go off on wild tangents. I have a lot going on in my head.
Yeah, it was clear. It was very helpful.
Good,
I think
good.
definitely people I think will watch this and will be able to also watch other videos and hopefully be able to find your books on Amazon and your movies through Disney and other sources. And I know you have more stuff coming out, which I think is exciting.
Cool.
And I totally agree that stories are so important. And I think even right now with our elections, I know people are telling themselves different stories about.
Yes.
Some are saying things are getting worse and they have a story that's a story to them.
Mm-hmm.
Others are saying things are getting better and there's a story that they have attached to that. Mm-hmm. And I think the importance of stories and the importance of words it cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree.
Yeah, and I think that what you're doing is not, as you said, if you had been born and you were good at XYZ, that's not story, right?
Yeah.
I disagree. I think that storytelling is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely need that art in our lives. So
yeah.
Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Otoma. This was so fun. Thank you so much.
And we definitely will be talking some more. But for those of you that like this episode, definitely click like and definitely subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.